So for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing Logan, the overall 10th installment of the X-Men franchise, as well as the third and final Wolverine movie. And the movie itself also takes a lot of inspiration from the comic book by Mark Millar called Old Man Logan. And according to actors Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, they stated that this would be their final time playing both Wolverine and Professor X after having played the roles for 17 years. So, the two questions that I must ask are, 1. Is Logan going to be a good Wolverine movie? And 2nd, will this be a good send-off for both Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart? As for the plot of the movie, sometime in the distant future when mutants have either been extinct or being hunted down, an aging Logan along with an ailing Professor X decided to go into exile by hiding out in a bunker near the Mexican border. But their attempt to hide from the world gets interrupted when a young little girl connected to Logan's past arrives at their doorstep. And following her are also dark forces connected to Logan. And now it's up to Logan and Professor X to go on one last mission to help out the little girl and fight the dark forces that are hunting them down. In terms of what I liked about the film, the movie has a very consistent tone, because the problem I had with the Wolverine was that movie had a very good consistent tone until the last 20 minutes. Grant, I did like those last 20 minutes, but I didn't feel that it went with the rest of the movie, whereas with this movie has a very consistent tone from start to finish. Cinematography is good. I also love the soundtrack and the songs they chose for the soundtrack, that they definitely fit the right moments for the movie. And I do like the way they go about the characters in terms of their development from start to finish. This is basically Hugh Jackman's best performance as Wolverine to date. Like, we've never seen Wolverine this vulnerable, he's old, he's broken down, he can't heal like he used to, and the conviction that Hugh Jackman gives in this movie is really spot on, really captures the ways Wolverine felt at certain points in time, which adds to the many layers of the film. Like, Patrick Stewart's also really great as this ailing Professor X. I thought that was a nice touch to him. And the kid actress playing X-23 I thought was awesomely cute. Grant, when she starts to talk, she kind of went downhill for me. Now granted, when X-23 does talk, it's actually kind of hilarious at first, because you figure out the reason as to why she can't talk is primarily because, oh, she speaks Spanish. This got a chuckle out of me. But then she started speaking some English, and I was like, oh, I just kind of wish she just stuck with the Spanish. Like, it made more sense to me as to why she was mute most of the movie. For the most part, I did really enjoy her performance in this movie. I also like the relationship and the interactions of Wolverine, Professor X, and X-23, because they're like a dysfunctional family. Because on one hand, you have Wolverine and X-23, who have this essentially estranged father-daughter relationship. Then you got X-23 and Professor X, who have this like grandfather-granddaughter kind of relationship. Then you got Wolverine and Professor X, who essentially acts as like a son taking care of the ailing father. And it definitely works for the film. It's essentially the heart of the story. And I like the fact that we finally get a Wolverine movie where Wolverine goes all out and just shreds people to pieces. Now granted, yeah, we've seen Wolverine stab people before, but not to this extent. Like, the film does not hold back from a violent standpoint. Like, this is probably the most violent X-Men film to date. But just because it's the most violent X-Men film to date, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, it's a 2-hour and 20-minute hack and slash feast. No, that's essentially secondary to the movie, while the primary thing is essentially the characters. This movie is very character-driven, and the points that matter in this movie do flesh out the entire movie. So in terms of what I dislike of the movie, everything that I dislike about the movie comes from the second half of the film, because once the middle action scene is done, I feel like the movie goes downhill from there, because the pacing of the movie starts to slow down drastically. Granted, in the context of the film, they do this because after having several intense action sequences, having a slower paced, quiet moment is welcomed. It just feels like it goes on for way too long in certain points in time. And as far as the villains go, the Ravengers, I didn't really think were that interesting, because on one hand, I think it is quite unique to see Wolverine fight against cybernetic mercenaries, but I just didn't think they were all that interesting, and at the end of the day, they were nothing but cannon fodder to Wolverine. And the guy leading them, he's entertaining, and that's about it, because I never really found him to be threatening. Like, what makes this guy in charge of this group of people? He seems like a coward most of the time, although he is willing to take action here and there. Also, I am disappointed that Bonebreaker isn't in charge of the Ravengers. And second, we don't have a scene of Logan getting chased by a T-Rex being possessed by a Venom symbiote. Well, all joking aside. And the main villain, or the primary villain behind the events of this movie, I just didn't think that was that interesting neither, because it's just like, oh, it's just a mad scientist kind of character, and he really doesn't appear in the movie that much. But then there's a surprise villain that you don't know about, because initially when this character was revealed, I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming, it was pretty awesome. But then, after I left the theater, I sat there and was like, wait, I found it to be a rather missed opportunity because they easily could have incorporated characters such as Sabretooth or Omega Red as like final villain. Actually, scratch that. They could have easily involved Dakin, Wolverine's son, into this movie, and it would have worked. And I'm surprised they didn't go in that direction either, because it totally would have worked for the movie. And the climax of the film, I thought, was really underwhelming, because it was supposed to be like a really intense action scene, and I was like, oh, I mean, there's stuff going on, but I was never really invested in the action. Like, I've never been this underwhelmed with a climax since Avengers Age of Ultron. Also, throughout the second half of the movie, there are points in time that are either never addressed again, or they show up for that one moment, and that's it. Also, the movie's not really clear at establishing when the movie takes place, because I just presume that this movie takes place in the alternate timeline that was created because of the events of X-Men Days of Future Past, but again, there's really no establishment as to when this takes place. Like, they weren't really clear on it. So, for my final verdict of Logan, it's a pretty good movie, and out of the Wolverine movies, it's perhaps the best of the bunch. That being said, it's not perfect by any means, but it definitely gets the job done. But do I myself like the movie? I do, but I definitely prefer something like The Wolverine, because even as down-to-earth as that movie was, it still had some fun elements to it. Whereas this one, I definitely appreciate the direction they're going in. It's just, I kind of like it when there's a lot more fun elements added to a movie. Granted, it just might come down to one of those things where I might have to watch this movie again to fully appreciate what the movie is trying to do. So, overall, pretty good movie. And before I give my final rating, what did everyone else have to say about Logan? Looks like a lot of people really like this movie. Like, a lot. I mean, granted, I think the movie's pretty good. I just don't think it's that good. But, just because I don't think it's that good, doesn't mean that I don't understand as to why people like it. And so, for my final rating of Logan, I give it 3.5 out of 5. Normally, at this point in time, I would normally ask a question, but I figured since this was basically the swan song for both Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart for playing both Wolverine and Professor X, I think it's only appropriate that we give a moment of silence to these two awesome actors who played two awesome characters for the past 17 years. And thank you for giving us such great characters to latch onto. And see you later.